AIO, I just found out my 42M wife 33F is pregnant, but we have only had protected sex. So my wife and I have been on an IVF journey for coming up to 24 months now. Today I just found out that we are pregnant, and we were both happy but also surprised as it has been one obstacle after another with numerous fertility issues. Female. It was also more confusing for us as we have only had sex a couple of times in her last cycle and both times were protected, condom. She's worked out that she's approximately 4.5 weeks pregnant. This would place her conception date roughly around the week beginning 9/12. This has rung alarms as I had an old workmate staying with us that week, and there was also a night where I was out all day and until late at night as it was my office Christmas party. When I got home I found them both passed out drunk on the lounge, sleeping at opposite ends albeit they seemed to have bonded on a friendship level after that night at the very least. This has made me question whether something may have happened. Today we were both genuinely shocked as we are about to start the next phase of IVF with implantation scheduled for next week. I know condoms aren't 100% effective, but she was adamant I had to wear one every time as she didn't want it to mess up her IVF cycle. Am I overthinking things here? I feel straight out asking her if there's anything I need to know will make her defensive and cause trust issues from such an accusation. Just to clarify, in my country we use DD/MM/YMY date format. Is it? 2. For clarity, for those that can't comprehend why we would use protection when trying for a baby. In our case, my wife has multiple fertility issues, and our DR doctor referred us to an IVF specialist who informed us that whilst it wasn't impossible, it was unlikely. Having already been trying naturally for 12 months unsuccessfully, we were surprised when we fell pregnant naturally, early in 2024. Alas, this pregnancy ended in miscarriage. Our team of doctors believe this was due to my wife's endometrial lining being too thin for the embryo to properly embed, so the last 6 months has been a journey to thicken her lining through medication and vitamins. And next week she was due to receive PRP therapy before we tried IVF implantation next month. So she did not want to risk the chances for falling pregnant whilst her lining was so low and endure the pain of another miscarriage. Hence the decision to use protection, which we have been doing successfully until last month. Story 2. AIO. Because I'm contemplating my entire marriage, because my partner wants to get rid of our dog. I, 25F, am newly married to my wife, 30F. But we've been together for 5 years. For the last 4 years I have been begging for a dog. I grew up with a dog, and I think it would be a great experience for our daughter, my wife's from a previous relationship, to grow up with, and she has been helping with my depression quite a bit, encouraging me to get out of bed, giving me purpose of caring for something. I have been struggling with our fertility issues for the past 2 years, and it feels so nice to just have something to love and take care of. My wife has never been a fan of dogs, but to my surprise she had agreed to get one in November, so we got our sweet girl. We picked her up at 8 weeks, so she has been a bit of a struggle while we adjust. Puppy blues. She bites, she has accidents, she whines and barks. You know, things dogs do. My wife has been losing her temper quicker than usual lately, and is blaming the dog on a lot of our relationship issues. I hear minimum 3 times a day, "I hate this stupid dog," or "My biggest regret in my life was getting a dog," or "I wish I would have just gotten you pregnant instead." Like it was our choice. We've been arguing a lot lately, life stressors, and now we're adding a pup to the mix, and I have now been asked, if you had to pick me or the dog, who would you pick? And I told her I wouldn't choose, and it wasn't fair to make me choose. That response has her thinking I choose the dog. I feel very frustrated with my wife's lack of involvement in the dog, and even more so with listening to her complain and scream at/about her multiple times a day. I'm even more frustrated our fertility issues are thrown into the mix, and I'm now being told that once I get rid of the dog she's willing to keep trying for a baby. So it's being held over my head? Just looking for advice here. Or maybe I'm overreacting and I should just get rid of the dog, but I love her so much and she really does bring me a lot of joy. Please help. Story 3. M29, 525. She slapped me twice, and now she's the victim. So this started during this new year. We were already having a rough time together for the last few months, but things started to change positively a little bit, and we both decided that from this coming new year we would forgive each other for all the hurt we've caused and start our relationship fresh with no grudges or regrets. We'll leave all the bad memories behind and start new. But things started spiraling down from 1st Jan itself. We spent New Year's Eve together and then decided to go for a night out to eat something or whatever. She was drinking heavily and was pretty drunk at that point. Meanwhile, me, who was supposed to drive the whole night, didn't drink at all and was completely sober. Then comes the twist. Apparently in the last couple of months, when me and my girlfriend were having problems or not talking to each other for a few days, she was spending most of her time with her friend, female. And the friend she spent her time with is an absolute piece of work. Her friend doesn't like me for whatever reason, even feels jealous when we're happy together. Whenever me and my girlfriend had an argument, she was ready to care for her and tell her I ain't shit, she deserves better, whatever. She even tried to hook her up with some guys during our fighting phase, like this guy likes you or you have to talk to other people to move on, while she's so sweet and appreciative of us when I meet her. FYI, she's 6-7 years older than my girlfriend and even older than me. She's used to having 2-3 guys to talk to simultaneously. And she even cheated on her boyfriend a month ago with some married dude who got what he wanted and now wants nothing to do with her. You get what I'm talking about, right? My girlfriend even justified her actions one day while drunk, saying that if her boyfriend is taking her for granted and she can find what she's looking for in someone else, then that's okay. That was one of the most stupidest thing I've heard in my life. So now, coming back to the main story, I didn't drink this New Year because I had to drive all night and she was quite drunk in the passenger seat. So it's 3 in the morning, we were on the road heading somewhere to eat. She suddenly starts to talk about her friend and how she understands her and how she can talk to her about anything and how wonderfully understanding she is, blah, blah, blah. I just ignored her at that point. Then suddenly she texted her at 3 in the morning. Her friend didn't reply. She texted again and again, repeatedly. I told her she must be sleeping at that time and you can talk to her in the morning. She became upset for whatever reason and then started calling her repeatedly and she didn't answer her phone. From that point on, my night was ruined. She became upset and super grumpy. We reached our destination shortly after and she was on her phone continuously. I had dinner, she didn't even eat properly. And a little incident happened at dinner. She was wearing a dress with slits down her legs. A typical dress with legs slit up to the thighs, and she had an overcoat. As we were sitting in the chair, she was sitting rather comfortably, if you know what I mean, and with that dress her thighs were showing a little too much for my liking, and, just to remind you, she was drunk at that point. I told her to sit properly and cover herself, and her answer was, "I'm comfortable with the way I'm sitting, do you have a problem?" I was clearly upset, but I didn't say anything, thinking she's just drunk, and we headed our way back to the hotel. The next day I confronted her about the incident and how she disrespected me and my feelings. I even cried a little bit. She cried too and said she doesn't remember anything about last night and it won't happen ever again. Now comes the day of the slap. After celebrating New Year away from our home, we were heading back. Everything seemed normal till then. However, our flight was late and we reached our destination quite late in the evening, so we couldn't get any buses to our hometown, so we decided to stay the night at a hotel and catch the bus early the next morning. As we were drinking, she got quite drunk once again and started mentioning her ex and how his wife's pregnant. Could you believe that? This has happened once earlier when she was drunk and mentioned her ex, which I warned her about to not do that ever again. Then she starts talking about a guy from her friends group. Yeah, the same friend I've mentioned above, that's been doing her, and how she thinks he understands her and his feelings are genuine towards her. She also mentioned how her friend was right about me, and this guy was also right about me, that I don't care about her and taking her for granted. At this point I had enough, and an argument started between us, in the heat of the moment. She told me to get out, she heard me, and started shouting at me that how could I curse at her, which I clearly wasn't. I was talking to myself. She held me by my collar and swung hard with her right hand that landed on my left cheek. I was stunned before I could process what had happened. She slapped me again, and at that point I was super angry and upset. I pushed her away from me. I didn't hit her in any way, I just pushed her away from me and went into the washroom. She followed me in and after realizing what she's done, started apologizing and crying in front of me. I calmed down after a bit while she was continuously apologizing to me. After some time we went to sleep, and the next day we reached our hometown where we're today. I came home and blocked her on all socials. She tried talking to me, called me, texted me for a bit, but then seems like she doesn't care anymore about her mistake. Only a few days after she's posting on her social stuff like, "Choose what gives you peace." And the most ridiculous part is that she's with her friend, yeah, the same one, and her friend just made a post about how female friends help each other through tough times. I don't know what the fuck to make out of this. I've decided to cut her out of my life forever and move on to something better. I'll let them play their little games. Story 4. AITA for choosing my wife over my recent ex-Chief. I 27M split from my wife 27F about a year ago. She had no motivation, passion, and the love between us just generally wasn't there anymore. So I hopped onto a dating site, as a divorce seemed imminent and she'd moved back in with her parents at that point. Even though, yes, I was of course still technically married, so was essentially cheating/having an affair, and I acknowledge that I'm a douchebag for that. Anyway, not long after being on a certain dating app, I met this amazing woman, 29F, who was very pretty and had so much in common with me. She had a great job, great income, her own house, and was just generally so interesting to be around and talk to. I'd never met anyone that I got on naturally so well with, and we ended up becoming not just partners, but best friends. We were the only people we could truly be our normal selves around, and it felt so liberating. She did have some past baggage in terms of doing things she wasn't particularly proud of, and she also had 2 kids. I don't have any, but want one of my own. Fast forward a few months and the wife contacted me saying she wanted to try again, and after some thinking I accepted. Now, I think the only real reasons I accepted were out of panic, convenience, and pity. If I went through with the divorce, my wife would have been left with barely anything to her name and nowhere to stay, etc. So I went to end my relationship with the girl, and naturally it was painful. She suggested moving in together, buying a bigger house so the kids weren't in as close proximity, equaling out custody with their biological father so she didn't have them as often, paying for therapy/counseling for us, all sorts. But I still refused, as I don't think any of that would have made a difference. The whole kids thing is still a major point for me. She has ADHD, which does make her very fun and exciting to be around, but her household is also pretty chaotic, and I don't think I'd want to raise our own child in amongst that chaos alongside her children. So I ended it, and like I said, it was difficult. As a person, she was perfect for me. We were perfect for each other. She made me so happy, but the baggage she came with was just too much for me to wrap my head around. She took a 24 or 26 can't remember year-old's virginity when she was like 14 or 16. She was drugged and RP'd once, and when she found out she was pregnant from it, decided to keep the child, and he's turned out as some autistic 10-year-old who can't physically talk, along with a few other issues. About 2 years after he was born, she intentionally fucked a guy 10 years older than her without protection because she thought having another baby would bring her back to reality after the trauma she gave herself from keeping the first child. She's been spit roasted in her living room after spending a few years on a swingers website. I accidentally got her pregnant, yeah I know, my bad, even though she was on contraception, and I had to practically beg her to get rid of it. She thought having 3 kids with 3 guys, even though we'd still not been together that long, was a great idea. My wife, however, we've been together just over 7 years now, and she told me that during the separation she'd stay up crying most nights holding her phone, hoping I'd text or call her. She's also only had a couple of partners before we met, and only had sex with one of them. I'm her second, and even during the separation she never even looked at another man. Fast forward again. I haven't spoken to that girl for a while, even though we left it on friendly terms, and all I can think about is how she's probably moved on and is seeing other men, which she is obviously well within her right to do. I've now moved back in with my wife, and she's just announced to me that she's pregnant. I thought I'd be happy. I thought this is what I'd want, to have my sensible wife back, along with our own child on the way, but I still don't feel happy. I know the choice should be obvious, but I still have such stronger feelings when I was with the other girl than I have when I'm with my wife. We just had so much more in common and clicked so much easier. But do I choose the girl I truly have a connection with, despite her off-putting past and baggage, or do I just bite the bullet and stay with my wife because she's a nicer person, and hope that I'll reconnect with those nice feelings for her at some point? I'm leaning more toward staying with the wife, but does that still make me an AH? Story 5. Called cops on her and she calls me the abuser. I, 36M, have been married to my wife, 37F, for 2.5 years, together 5. My second marriage, her first. We each brought a daughter, hers 12, mine 9, and special needs. From chromosomal abnormality with significant developmental delay and intellectual disability. Our son is now 15. We've been through a lot. I didn't have any past experience with physical abuse. I didn't know how to handle when she would escalate during our conflicts, and I've seen her flip her lid, for lack of a better term, so many times through the years, essentially entering into an entirely emotional state and trying to provoke responses from me. She's broken so many plates and mugs and escalated to throwing objects at me, and at some point it escalated into physical contact. I initially tried walking away, but I found her throwing things at me while I'm leaving or coming after me. Eventually I defended myself to the extent to stop the attack, mostly by restraining her arms and legs. Once I slapped her after she came after me when our son was between us. She says I choked her once, but I don't remember that. Last year, my sister was murdered by her husband. This sister actually brought my wife and I together through her daycare and had a strong bond with my stepdaughter. This happened 2-3 days after our baby shower. The last year and a half has been hell. The conflicts intensified. I went through major depressions. I've nobody left in my inner circle. My parents are dead, and my sister was my last source of wisdom. We've been in couples therapy for half a year, and I've been in individual therapy for 3-4 months. We've been in therapy before, but the abuse never came out until I brought it out in individual therapy, and then that led to it coming out in couples therapy. I regret we didn't get more of a plan for safety ahead of time. In November, I overheard her derisively mocking my special needs daughter when she was crying. It nearly broke my heart. It sounded so evil and malicious. I walked in the room and looked at her, and she asked me if there was something I'd like to say. I didn't have words. In December, it all came to head as a conflict built for 2 days. I walked in the door with donuts and had my son and my daughter in the kitchen eating. I had gotten back from taking my stepdaughter to dance and cleaning the dance studio to help pay her tuition. She walked in and flipped her lid from the ongoing conflict we hadn't resolved yet. She threw her coffee all over me and then threw the mug at the wall. Our children started wailing, crying. I pushed her out of the room for fear of them. She screamed for divorce like she does often in these battles. Then she went upstairs. Something broke in me. I called her father. He didn't answer. I called the National DV hotline. They didn't answer. I called a local one and they answered. They said I should call the cops. I called another family friend, the wife. She had called the cops on her husband the year previous, and once they made it through the difficulty of that time, they haven't had an incident since. They said I just don't show for court and the charges get dropped, but the system works that way for those who get the warning sign, and it's the only way to get them to stop. Still, I wavered, but then I heard what I thought was slamming around upstairs, and I finally called the cops. She went to jail for a few hours. A male inmate told her she looked tasty. Her parents are furious at me. Our couple's therapist thinks I overreacted. My therapist recognizes what she did was not okay, but that the consequences of me calling the cops is a very drawn-out repair process. And that I'm the abuser, but she goes to jail. I think we both have a part in it. I'd like us to sign a fair fighting contract that reaffirms for us both not to escalate to this place. Life has been even harder for nearly a month now. I'm losing hope of a functioning relationship with my wife. Maybe we never had one. I'm trying too hard to work on myself. Our conflicts are so messy. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm lost.